Hello, my fine feathered friends. This is Songbird, and I wanted to possibly help out some people who were having some difficulty finding some settings in single player on ASA. So I just found these myself and wanted to share it. So basically, if you go here to create or resume game, this is where you'd launch a single player game or a non-dedicated server. And if you go up at the top here, there are a bunch of different options. The mod settings, which that'll probably have more content later on. You can click on available mods, see what is out there, what is available. But as of now, I think they're encouraging people to kind of hold off on downloading mods just for the moment, because got some bugs to work out there. But anyway, if you go into game rules, that's actually where most of the settings are. So most of these are still on the default, which apparently it defaults to actual single player settings, just FYI. But see, the default is damage is ×2, so players deal more damage, resistance is 1, all of these, health recovery, harvesting damage. Creature, this is all of the settings regarding creatures, the number of creatures on the map. So if you wanted to have half as many dinos or twice as many dinos, you would change this number. The damage from creatures, the creature's resistance, how fast their food drain is, so how fast they get hungry, etc., etc. Harvesting damage. This one means that they can collect resources faster. So by default, creatures gather resources a lot faster than players, which makes sense. And structure, disable structure placement collision. I love that this is on by default. That is awesome. It makes building so much easier. I usually, especially on single player, I usually turn down the damage repair cooldown because I don't want to have to wait a whole minute after something gets damaged before I can repair it. I want to repair it as soon as I notice that it's damaged, so I turn that way down usually. World, we've got the XP multiplier, the taming speed multiplier. So if you want to speed up the taming, if you want to speed up XP gain or slow it down, you can do that. And check it out right here. If you want to be able to level movement speed, you can enable that on your single player game. Flyer speed leveling as well. So if you don't like the new default setting of players and creatures not being able to level movement speed, well, there you go. Just change that. Maximum difficulty. I'm actually going to turn that on. That forces the max creature level to 150, which, yeah, that's what I'm used to playing with. And having all the creatures be much lower level is kind of annoying, personally, I think, because I like to tame the higher level creatures. So difficulty level, if not maximum. So if you turn this on, then you can just ignore that one. You can set it to PvE mode or hardcore mode. I think these are PvE mode. That's probably going to mostly just affect if you're setting up a non-dedicated server. So if you're going to be hosting a game for a couple of friends to jump in on, then you can decide if you want it to be PvE or PvP. I don't really see how it would affect much in single player. Unlimited respecs, you can mind wipe and change your specs as often as you want. And then also over here in rules, it's got all of these rules. Global voice chat, notify player joined, I turned that on. Notify player left on. If you want to be informed, see in the chat box basically whether a player has used an admin command, then you can turn that off. You can turn that on. Crosshairs on. You can disable the HUD completely if you want to. No survivor downloads, dino downloads, item downloads. This doesn't really apply right now because there's only the one map and transfers are not yet enabled. But once transfers are enabled, you'll be able to decide if you want to allow friends or other people or even yourself to download characters, survivors, and items from a different map save or from a different server into your locally hosted game or not. That'll be up to you to decide. I usually just leave that off because I like having the option of being able to do that. You can enable PvP gamma, show creative mode. So this will basically just make it a lot easier to find creative mode if you don't want to have to type the command in the console. Then it'll just show in the pause menu that you can switch to creative mode there, and that may be easier. You can disable loot crates, disable friendly fire, and single player settings are on by default. You can turn them off if you want, and then your settings will more closely match settings on a server. But of course, single player settings are specifically kind of balanced, intending for a lone player, to make it a little bit easier to advance as a lone player. But that is completely up to you whether you want to make it a harder gameplay experience for yourself or not. And then over here in advanced, this is where we find a lot of other things like flyer carry. We got if you want to set up a timer so that your little your mini server, the game that you're hosting on your own local machine, has a specific schedule basically of switching between PvE and PvP. So for example, if you wanted to be in PvE mode for 3 hours and then have an hour of PvP mode, you could set it up for that. Okay, use system time. So you can decide if you want to switch between modes at real world times rather than in-game time, I guess. And whether or not you want to allow tribe wars, cave building, disable gamma, all of that kind of stuff. Non-permanent diseases is now on by default, at least in single player settings. What that means is if you catch a disease like swamp fever or mega rabies and it kills you, then when you respawn, you won't still have the disease. I almost always play with that setting because I think it's just fair that if a disease kills you, you shouldn't still have it when you respawn. But people who want that really hardcore, super difficult experience and want to have to go and craft themselves an antidote or something to cure themselves, then you can set it, then you can turn that off, and then you will have the disease until either the timer wears off for it in the case of mega rabies, or until you craft yourself a cure in the case of swamp fever. Allow cave flyers is actually on by default now. So that was interesting to see. I'm sure it'll probably be different on other maps, maybe when Fjordur, for example, is finally added. I don't know, just a guess. But you see, we've got all of these different categories here for advanced settings. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you've got all of your PvP settings on Dino decay, structure decay, stuff like that, structure damage, all of your different world things, day cycle speed, night cycle speed, spoiling time, corpse decomposition time. So for example, if you don't want your body to decay and your bag to disappear quite as quickly, then you can set this to be higher. Like I usually set it to like 5 or something, or 6, so that my bag will stay there for quite a while if I get myself into a classic Ark death spiral where I keep dying trying to recover my stuff. Gives me a little bit more time before my bag disappears. And yeah, harvest health. So this basically increases, you'll get more stone from a single rock basically when you're hacking at it with your hatchet before the rock completely breaks and is gone. So resource respawn, how fast resources respawn. If you want resources in the area around your base to respawn quicker, then you can change that. Put it down to 0.5 or something. Your crop growth speed, various intervals, breeding settings, all of these I've left at the default for now. But that's where you'll find all of that. And then we've got all the wild dino settings. I've left all of these default as well. But you'll see that they're all at 1 except torpidity's actually at 0.5. So yeah, so this is a scaling factor for the amount of torpidity gained by tamed creatures as a percentage of the default setting. So tamed creatures get less torpidity from wild dinos, is I guess that's saying. That's good to know. You can up their speed if you want them to be super scary fast. That's up to you. A lot of things here that you can change that will completely change your game experience, actually. So these are how many points basically your creature will get per level when you level them up. So by default here, the health and the melee are quite a bit lower, so they will not level up their health or their melee nearly as quickly apparently as the other stats by default. And the stat affinity, I believe this has to do with if the creature is imprinted, then it will gain more health and more damage per point assigned to those. I believe that's what that means, but I could be wrong. And then for the player, all your stats, how much you will gain per level assigned. This is just the default amount. Fortitude, for some reason, they've put that as 2, so you can get more fortitude for each point that you put into fortitude, if that makes sense. And then XP multipliers, how much XP you get from different sources. You can customize that. And then miscellaneous here, you can set how many players are allowed per tribe. So like if you were going to be hosting a non-dedicated server, I believe on Steam, you can host up to 8 people total. So if you wanted to have, 4 teams of 2 people each, or 2 teams of 4 people each, or something like that, you could set how many players can be in each tribe. And the maximum amount of XP, basically, you can set it so that players or creatures can't level up past a certain level, which could definitely kind of change the gameplay. If you want to prevent unlocking of higher tier later game engrams, if you want to keep it to a more primitive experience, then you can just set this XP level. You'd have to look up the multiplier online to find out what number to use, but you could just set this so that you can't unlock a the end game type of engrams. Flyer platform unaligned basing. This enables creatures to stand on the flyer platform. So if, for example, if you want to be able to fly around with your Quetzal and let players who are not in your tribe stand on the platform or land their Pteranodon on the platform, then you would want to turn this on, because otherwise they cannot stand on there. And then this one, passive defenses hurt riderless dinos. This is about spike walls. So if you want spike walls to actually be able to do damage to wild dinos, as opposed to just dinos belonging to other characters, other players, then you would turn this on. I usually have this on especially if I'm playing in single player. I'm not going to have any other players on, and so spike walls are kind of only useful to me if they can actually defend me against wild creatures. If this is off, then wild creatures, the spike wall will basically be just a wall. It will still prevent them from going through it, but they won't actually take damage from it. Only allow specific engrams. You can set that if you want to block certain engrams, if you don't want players to be able to make explosives, for example, or you don't want players to be able to make turrets. If you can block those engrams. Allow raid dino feeding. This refers to titanosaurs, and I believe later on it also refers to the titans on extinction, but I could be mistaken about that. But it enables it. It makes it so that you can feed a titanosaur that you tamed, and it won't just slowly starve to death. And how fast the food drain is. You can turn off the photo mode, allow custom recipes. You can make custom recipes much more effective if you want to. You could scale this up to 10 or something if you wanted to encourage people to make custom recipes. You can set the loot quality for your supply crates. Bump that up a bit if you're getting just lots of useless stuff in drops, and maybe you'll get 2 medium crop plot blueprints instead of 1. Woohoo! And fishing loot quality. I usually turn this up because I figure not very many people actually do fishing in Ark. And so if they actually do, I want to reward that. I usually turn that up to like 5 or something so that you'll get really good loot if you actually take the time to go fishing. Fuel consumption interval, how fast you go through gasoline, stuff like that. Platform structure limit. This is a scaling factor for how many structures can be placed on a platform. And this also affects things like rafts. And so I usually turn this up because I like to make cool rafts. Show floating damage text. So this is where you would make sure that is turned on. And then over here, we've got all of the different engrams. And so they've made it really simple in ASA for you to go through. And if you want to block certain engrams, you can. You just click them until they're grayed out like that. And then that will prevent that engram from being able to be unlocked in game. It will hide it from the player engram list, essentially. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. And have fun, everybody. We'll see you around. Have a great day. Bye-bye.